Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm here with Daniel Ramos, who is the Executive Director of the Harris County Office of Management and Budget, with Dr. Tina Peterson, Executive Director of the Harris County Flood Control District, and Dr. Ismail Porsa, who is the President and CEO of Harris Health. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., your Harris County Commissioners Court will meet to hold hearings and potentially adopt a budget and a tax rate for Harris County's upcoming fiscal year. A tax rate for Harris County, the Flood Control District, and the Harris County Hospital District. Setting our tax rate and establishing a budget are some of the most important things we'll do this year and that we do each year. It's how we provide the services necessary to run a functional and stable county for our size, and how we're able to keep our economy competitive and thrive as a community. Over each of the past 3 years, we've set tax rates that were the lowest since 1993. Just in the past 3 years, our county has grown by almost 250,000 people, and we're having to provide services to all of those folks. Additionally, in 2019, I inherited enormous needs that had gone unaddressed for far too long. For example, the life expectancy in Harris County. While it's 78.9 years, it can vary up to 30 years depending on your zip code. 15.9% of our residents were in poverty in 2020, the last year we have this data for, much higher than the national average of 11.9% that same year. Almost 20% of our roads are, to simplify the technical terms, not in good condition. Tomorrow's meeting affects the lives of every single resident in Harris County. Here's what's being voted on. The budget would add millions of dollars for public safety, including a substantial pay increase for frontline police officers. On public safety, our $1.4 billion proposed budget for safety and justice makes up 64% of the county's total general fund proposal. This constitutes a 23% increase since 2019. For the sheriff and constable's offices, we're proposing $96.7 million in increases compared to the last full fiscal year. This includes funding for at least 35 new violent crime investigators, 100 new detention officers, and 22 new prosecutors for the district attorney's office. It would also fund pay raises for all frontline police officers and detention officers across the sheriff and constables for a total raise of more than 6% over a couple of years. On flood control, the proposed flood control budget is $137 million, every dollar of which is needed to actually maintain the 180 flood bond projects that are being built. That means cutting the grass and pulling debris out of bayous. It means keeping storm drains clean. This budget includes our largest investment ever into our drainage system, which is vital to fight flooding in Harris County. On public health, our public hospital system, our hospital district budget is $2.38 billion to provide vital, life-saving services for our residents, including those who otherwise can't afford health care. The budget allows Harris Health to continue its incredibly important work, including tackling a wait list of 3,000 patients needing colonoscopies. Even with all of that including, our proposed budget would decrease the tax rate for homeowners. The combined tax rate for Harris County, the Flood Control District, and the Hospital District is a 1% tax decrease from last year and represents the lowest combined tax rate in over 30 years. This is the 4th year in a row that we're cutting the tax rate, resulting in a 6% cumulative decrease in the overall tax rate over the past 4 years. Most importantly, this budget adds up. For example, it proposes hiring for law enforcement while ensuring there's enough funding for the patrol cars they will drive and the district attorneys that will process the arrest. It's a realistic budget. We have a practical, sensible, realistic proposal that increases funding for law enforcement and for other agencies and tools that these individuals and departments need to continue their critical work. Now, I have to note that we need a quorum of at least 4 members of the Harris County Commissioners Court in order for us to be able to move forward with setting those tax rates and with setting that budget. I remain hopeful that at least 3, if not 4, of my colleagues will show up and vote on this proposed budget. If 4 members of Commissioners Court do not show up for the vote, hundreds of millions of dollars in the Harris County budget would be thrown into chaos. Quite frankly, it creates a huge amount of uncertainty as to what the budget would look like and how we could make sure that Harris County continues operating adequately. We may have to continue to set public tax rate and budget hearings until we have set a budget. We may be forced to adopt last year's budget despite having new costs and these needs for additional investments to tackle the gaps that I mentioned we have, which are very serious: patients in need of care, flood control projects in need of maintenance, law enforcement in need of additional support. So a lot is in limbo unless we set adequate tax rates and adopt a budget. Flood control projects, veteran affairs programs, pollution control, our fire marshal's office, and our law enforcement agencies would all see cuts to vital resources we need to function in a healthy and safe environment. This would impact the entirety of county operations. Here's what would happen if this budget doesn't pass. The county would have to consider hiring and spending freezes across all departments. For the sheriff, this could mean a $76 million overall budget cut, including 10.6% cuts for patrol, roughly the equivalent of 293 deputies. 12% cuts for the jail, where right now we need more support than ever, the equivalent of roughly 370 detention officers. For the constables, it would mean a $21 million cut, possibly, roughly the equivalent of 200 deputies. All of that while foregoing part of the raises being proposed for all frontline officers. For public health, it could lead to a reduction of staff at clinical sites, impacting the county's ability to offer immunizations, provide wellness exams and disease screenings, prevent infectious disease outbreaks, like working on the monkeypox virus that's been a concern for the community over the last few months. As we near the end of hurricane season, it would limit our ability to monitor for and combat mosquito-borne illnesses, like the West Nile virus. On our public hospital system, if Harris Health runs a deficit for fiscal year 23, the first services to be cut would be these kinds of medical services. It could be services like post-acute care for 646 patients, care such as dialysis, colonoscopy, and hospice for thousands of patients, inpatient behavioral health services, and more. If our public system is defunded because of a lack of quorum, even if you've never set foot in public hospitals like Ben Taub or LBJ, it will affect your healthcare access. Non-governmental hospitals would have to absorb the demand for care. Emergency room wait times would get longer, and uncompensated care costs at private hospitals like Memorial Hermann and Methodist would skyrocket, threatening those hospitals' missions and ability to stay afloat. To that point, we received a letter from the CEOs of our Harris County hospitals, private hospitals, Memorial Hermann, Methodist, Baylor, the Medical Center, explaining the adverse system a lower Harris Health tax rate would have. These are quotes from the letter. We will have downstream effects for every hospital, every patient, every employer, and every resident in the county. Here's another direct quote from the letter. Emergency room wait times will increase, as will wait times for care. That is not what Harris County residents deserve, especially coming out of a pandemic. The good news is that these potential negative impacts do not have to be our reality, because tomorrow we can adopt a sensible budget that serves the residents of Harris County. I look forward to tomorrow's meeting, and I hope to see all of my 4 colleagues there. Harris County residents deserve a budget that keeps them safe and healthy and supports critical infrastructure, and I'm committed to doing my part to make that happen, and I've been doing everything I can. Now, I share all of this. I know people are busy. I know the last thing folks want to hear about is budgets. But this is very important, and the community should be aware about the vote taking place tomorrow, because the decisions we make tomorrow, the decision whether or not to show up to the vote, will have an impact on every resident and many facets of life, from public health to public safety to flood control and more in the residents of Harris County. Let me repeat very briefly in Spanish, and then we'll hear from Mr. Ramos, Dr. Peterson, and Dr. Porsa. Mañana a las 10 de la mañana los comisionados del condado Harris van a reunirse para adoptar un presupuesto y una tasa de impuestos para el condado, el Distrito de Control de Inundaciones y el Distrito de Hospitales. Adoptar una tasa de impuestos y un presupuesto es uno de los trabajos más importantes que tenemos como líderes del condado Harris. Durante los últimos 3 años hemos adoptado una tasa de impuestos la más baja desde el año 1993. Al mismo tiempo, durante los últimos 3 años, nuestro condado ha crecido. Casi 250,000 de residentes nuevos han llegado al condado Harris. Además, cuando yo llegué en el 2019, heredamos enormes necesidades que no han sido atendidas. Por ejemplo, la esperanza de vida en el condado puede variar hasta 30 años dependiendo del código postal en donde viven. El nivel de pobreza, casi 16%, es mucho más alto que el presupuesto nacional de 11.9%. La reunión de mañana afecta la vida de cada residente en el condado Harris. En cuanto a la seguridad pública, el presupuesto que estamos proponiendo le invertiría 1.4 billones de dólares al presupuesto de justicia y seguridad en el condado. Sería un 64% del propuesto general del condado. Ese es un incremento de 23% desde el 2019, casi 100 millones de dólares en incrementos para los alguaciles. Incrementaría los investigadores por 35, 100 oficiales nuevos de detención y 22 nuevos fiscales. En cuanto al control de inundaciones, es un presupuesto que adiciona son 137 millones. Todos los dólares de esos 137 se requieren para poder mantener los proyectos de control de inundaciones que estamos construyendo. Limpiar, por ejemplo, el césped, sacar los desechos o escombros de los pantanos, limpiar los desagües pluviales. Nuestro hospital público, un presupuesto de 2.38 billones para ofrecer servicios hospitalarios a nuestro condado. Eso atacaría una lista de espera que tenemos en este momento, 3,000 pacientes que necesitan colonoscopías. Aún más importante, nuestro presupuesto todo suma. Propone la contratación de agentes del orden al tiempo que garantiza suficientes fondos para tener una patrulla, para tener un fiscal. Es una propuesta sensible, realística. Pero si no hay 4 miembros de la Corte presentes mañana, no vamos a poder adoptar este presupuesto. Serían cientos de millones de dólares de presupuesto del condado Harris que serían lanzados en caos. Habría una incertidumbre enorme. Tanto los proyectos de iluminaciones como los proyectos para nuestros veteranos, el control de contaminación, la oficina de jefe de bomberos y más se verían afectados. Tendríamos que congelar la contratación de empleados, tendríamos que cortar presupuestos a través de todos los departamentos. Podría significar una reducción de 76 millones al presupuesto del alguacil, incluyendo un corte de 10.6%, 293 oficiales. Para los otros alguaciles, los constables, 21 millones de dólares en reducciones, 200 oficiales, policías. Para la salud pública, una reducción del personal en los centros clínicos, incluyendo aquellos que trabajan en el tema de la viruela del mono. También afectaría nuestro sistema hospitalario público. Prevendría el cuidado posagudo de más de 600 pacientes, servicios como diálisis, colonoscopías y hospicios. Aún peor, nos afectaría a todos nosotros, aunque usted no visite los hospitales públicos. Recibimos una carta de los presidentes de todos nuestros hospitales privados en el condado, de Memorial Hermann, de Methodist, de Baylor, del Centro Médico, explicando, y esto es directamente de la carta, que una tasa de impuestos más baja pondría en peligro nuestra capacidad para tratar cada paciente, cada empleador, cada residente en el condado, que el tiempo de espera en las salas de emergencias incrementaría. La buena noticia es que esto no tiene que ser realidad, porque podemos adoptar un presupuesto sensible el día de mañana. Sé que todos están ocupados, hay temas importantes, el tema de presupuestos de repente para la comunidad es algo aburrido, pero esto nos afecta a todos y quiero que sepan lo que podría suceder mañana si no tengo al menos 3 colegas que aparezcan a votar para aprobar un presupuesto. With that, I will pass it on to Daniel Ramos. Daniel Ramos, who is the Executive Director of the Harris County Office of Management and Budget.
Hello, thank you, Judge. My name is Daniel Ramos. I'm the Budget Director for Harris County. Despite the challenging environment, we are very proud to have work to develop a responsible and sustainable budget that reflects our Commissioners Court's priorities. It allows us to maintain the county's strong financial health while funding critical investments in areas like public safety, justice, elections, and the maintenance of our critical infrastructure. We continue to fully fund both our pension and retiree health plans, maintaining high-quality benefits despite rising costs in the healthcare sector. In addition to the record levels of funding the judge already mentioned for law enforcement, the District Attorney's Office will also see the largest budget in their history. We continue to fund the triage program to reduce the court backlog through ARPA funds, and have made a general fund investment in the DA's intake division, as well as raises across all the DA ranks. This budget allows us to leverage ARPA funds to provide critical service to Harris County residents instead of using them to defray recurring general fund costs. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Peterson.
Thank you. So the Flood Control District was created by the Texas Legislature in 1937 in response to major flooding events in the Houston area and Harris County. And our mission is to build flood damage reduction projects that work with appropriate regard for community and natural values. So as we continue to deliver new infrastructure, including projects in the 2018 Flood Control Bond Program, we must maintain the district's existing infrastructure to ensure that we can reduce the risk of flooding across Harris County. So as proposed, the $137 million budget represents a historic investment in flood resiliency and allows the Flood Control District to maintain our current level of service to the citizens of Harris County. That includes the 23 watersheds in the county and maintenance of over 2,500 channels of grass, bayous, creeks, drainage channels. It includes more than 200 stormwater detention basins and over 100 miles of concrete channels and 19,000 acres of vegetation. So we are very excited about the proposed outcomes of this budget and look forward to collaborating with our Commissioners Court to ensure that this service is delivered and maintained to our residents, our businesses of Harris County. I'll turn it over to Dr. Porsa.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge, for having me. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Esmail Porsa. I'm the President and CEO of Harris Health System. Judge, if I may, let me start, as always, by thanking all of our healthcare workers and medical staff at Harris Health System and everywhere else for their resilience and for rising up to every challenge that's been thrown their way. I also want to thank the judge and the commissioners for their continued support of our public hospital system, the Harris Health System. Over the last couple of years of the pandemic, the healthcare workers were called heroes, and they were, and they are still today. What they have endured, what they have given of themselves in dealing with the pandemic, putting everyone else ahead of themselves, their loved ones and their families, is nothing short of heroic. It's nothing short of legendary, and there are the things that people are going to be talking about and writing about in articles and books for years to come. Among the many lessons that we learned from COVID-19, two of them that I want to highlight. One is the crucial importance of our public hospital system, Harris Health System, to this community, not just for the care of the uninsured and underinsured, but for the entire health system in the city of Houston and Harris County. You heard from the judge some of the comments from the other CEOs of the hospital systems, how important the function of Harris Health System is for the entire county. It was also a clear realization that chronically there has been a significant underinvestment in our public hospital system, Harris Health. The tax rate that was proposed last week in the Commissioners Court and is up for a vote tomorrow is one step into addressing that significant underinvestment. Harris Health System is the largest public hospital system in the state of Texas, and yet it receives the lowest tax rate and the lowest tax dollar support of any large hospital system in Texas, public hospital system in Texas. The tax rate proposal that again is up for a vote tomorrow not only reduces the overall tax rate, but as I mentioned previously, takes a step in addressing the underinvestment in our public hospital system. This tax rate is coming to us at an inflection point. Harris Health System is currently looking at expanding its services and offering more services. And it's also looking into replacing our two public hospitals, Bentov and LBJ Hospital, that are fast approaching their end of useful life. I hope and I pray that our commissioners are going to continue to support Harris Health System tomorrow and in the years to come. And I want to thank you again. Thank you, Judge.
We'll take any questions.
Judge, specifically, how much money do you have prioritized for hiring and retaining law enforcement officers? Commissioner Ramsey says that he's only asking for 200 officers and about 20 million of the 100 million you'll be receiving in increased revenue. Is that workable?
So I'll let Mr. Ramos address that, because I know the direction that I've given, that the court has given, is as much as we can possibly afford for those frontline law enforcement officers, we should invest in. There have been some proposals of let's hire 1,000, let's hire this many. And obviously, there are many open positions right now that are fully funded. But the bigger concern is it's not just about hiring someone. You got to have the money to fund that position in perpetuity, and you got to have the money for the patrol car, for the DA that's going to process the arrest, for the detention officer that's going to look after that inmate. And so I know that the latest he can offer us sort of the latest of how much we can push that number.
So in the baseline budget, there's a little over $5 million to increase wages by 2% for all law enforcement across all ranks, including detention officers. There's been a proposal by Commissioner Garcia to raise that to I made a proposal to 4.25. Commissioner Garcia has gone on the record saying 4.5%, which would bring a total little over 10 million. And again, what we're trying to do is prioritize the folks that we have, making sure that they're staying here and that it's an attractive job for folks to be able to come in to.
If this is in fact part of a political stunt by some, why make a political pawn out of the health director?
I'm sorry?
If this is a political stunt by some, why are you making a political pawn out of the Houston health system?
We're here to call attention and make sure that the public is aware what's at risk. And what's at risk is very real. And the word politics has not been mentioned in this press conference at all, nor should it be. What's at the table right now, what's on the chopping board, is the ability of the flood control district to maintain flood bond projects. It could be that bond projects would have to be downsized if we're not able to maintain a project that large because this budget doesn't pass. It's the ability for us to give an over 6% raise to our officers, 2% added, even more than 2% added to what we did this previous year. It's the ability for us to not reach, is it a $45 million deficit? If this budget doesn't pass, our public hospital system would be at a $45 million deficit. I'm grateful that Dr. Porsa and the leaders of these various hospitals have decided to speak up. I don't know them well enough to know their political affiliation, but I highly doubt that they all are in agreement. However, this issue is very much a practical bread and butter issue for the people of Harris County. That is how well our hospitals function, how much we can retain our law enforcement officers. Because, right now we have about, 400 open positions across the board in frontline law enforcement? So this is, for the constables and the sheriff, we have around 400 unfilled, fully funded positions. And when you look into it, how are you going to fill those positions? You got to pay people better. And so that's why the emphasis has been on let's make sure that we pay folks enough so that we can hire them. And then also we're increasing the investigators that focus on violent crimes, the district attorneys that focus on violent crimes, and the detention officers, because our jail backlog is a big issue. And we need to make sure that all of those folks who are accused of a crime, violent crime, are in the jail.
Hurricane season and global pandemic. People may say that you are scaring people. Is this a scare tactic?
I'm always erring on the side of transparency. Tomorrow is a big day, and it might be a topic that normally flies under the radar, right? A budget, it sounds kind of wonky, it sounds kind of boring. Why should you pay attention? You should pay attention because if this budget doesn't pass, the wait times at hospitals will increase. That did not come from my mouth, my words. Those are the direct words of the CEOs of the hospitals in Harris County. So I would say if this is a scare tactic, then all of these people are colluding to scare, because reminder here of what these folks said, and we'll share the letter afterwards, but they specifically said the wait times at our emergency rooms will be increased, and this will affect downstream effects for every hospital, every patient, every employer, and every resident in the county. My hope is that this won't come to pass, but I just want people to know what's on the table tomorrow, because if it doesn't pass, I don't want folks to say, well, nobody told me that there was a chance that my public hospital would be $45 million in the red, that my flood control project might get downsized, and that my law enforcement officers might not receive the salary increase we need to retain and to fill the funded and open positions we have. There are 400 boots right now in need of feet to fill them. This is how we fill them.
And on getting the quorum,
Oh,
Yeah, I
Dr.
was just going
Corsa.
to add, if I may, Judge, to address that question, this is not a scare tactic. This is reality. If, for whatever reason, tomorrow we do not get a vote on our tax rate and we revert back to the no net revenue, what it means for me, for the Harris Health System, for our hospital system, is close to $50 million loss, deficit in our operational budget. What does that mean to our patients? Recently I was asked by our board to prepare for that unlikely event, hopefully unlikely. That translates for us to more than 10,000 patients not receiving the services that we are currently providing to them. Those services include skilled nursing facility, long-term care facilities, hospice, rehab, dialysis, colonoscopies, inpatient behavioral health, as the judge mentioned, inpatient services. We, Harris Health System, currently rent hospital beds at other locations, at other hospitals, because we do not have capacity, going back to that chronic underinvestment in our system. Home health and durable medical equipment, wheelchairs, breathing machines, hospital beds, things of that nature. Those are all the things that would have to be eliminated. These are the services we are providing today that we would have to stop providing if tomorrow we do not get a vote on our tax rate. So by no means is this meant to be a scare tactic. Thank you, Judge.
Mr. Ramos has a correction, and we'll take the question.
I'm sorry, it's 10 million currently in the baseline for the 2% COLAs, and we're proposing a little over 10 million to get up to 4.25%.
Judge, on the quorum tomorrow, the two Republican commissioners, they have not signaled whether or not they're going to be there for sure or not. One of the commissioners has compared it to not going as a veto of the budget. And then he also talked about how you may have the power to send the sheriff to get a quorum. Would you send the sheriff if the two Republicans don't show up so you can have a quorum to pass a budget, considering what's at stake here?
I have faith that they will come. I mean, this is a proposal where I've heard how important it is for them, and frankly, has been my work over the past 3 years as well to make sure that the tax rate is cut. And so, for example, this was a tough decision on the hospital district. Is we could go a little higher, but I wanted to make sure overall there was a tax rate cut because I know it's important to all of us. And so, I did that in a nod to the colleagues. There are funds that Mr. Ramos needed to maintain for general sort of solvency of how that he administers the county, but Commissioner Ramsey says, I want even more money for law enforcement. So they're really squeezing funds from other areas that, ideally we would would keep them there, but let's just figure out how to get to the very, very edge so that we can meet our colleagues in the middle. And so that's where they've pulled this other $10 million. I think it could go up to $20 million that they've managed to squeeze out. And we've said that, put that into law enforcement, whatever will help us get these boots filled and these people on the ground to continue protecting our public safety. And that's on top of the 23% increase we've had since 2019. And of course, 60+% of the budget. The biggest thing for me is all of us have expressed how important public safety is to us. And I just cannot imagine them willingly foregoing this salary increase, this $100 million for the constables and sheriffs, frontline deputies, and the health of people in the community. So I'm hopeful that they will come. But as I said, I want to share this because if in the unlikely event, as you said, this doesn't happen, then I don't want the community to say, why wasn't I warned? As far as what we can and can't do, I mean, I don't know. That's never been my style. I don't know if that's actually a thing, one does. I think that we have a very concrete, very realistic proposal, and I'm inviting my colleagues to join me, and I've worked very hard as much as I've been able to in the public sphere, and I know that Mr. Ramos and his colleagues have been working extremely hard to, as much as humanly possible, within a budget that adds up, to really cede to what their priorities are, which ultimately are all of our priorities: public health, public safety, and with public safety comes safety from flooding. That's, for all of us, our priorities.
You're not sure if you're going to get the sheriff to enforce a quorum if the two Republicans don't show?
I just don't see that as, frankly, I didn't even think about it. I thought that was kind of a joke that Commissioner Cagle is throwing around. I just need him to or hope, for the sake of the community, that he and Commissioner Ramsey, Commissioner Ellis, and Commissioner Garcia will join us.
Is Commissioner Ramsey's proposal unreasonable?
So I'll let Mr. Ramos explain, where you guys are. Unfortunately, so only 2 members of Commissioner's Court can communicate and about what their perspective is. I've not had communications with any of my colleagues, but I don't know if Commissioner Ramsey has. And so I don't know, Mr. Ramos, if you would even be allowed to tell me where you are in conversations with Commissioner Ramsey. No, he says no. So look, what I will say is we have very talented budget experts. Mr. Ramos here has a lot of experience. Dave Barrett, County Administrator from the from the private sector, energy sector, someone also very experienced. The issues of public safety and how we can tackle is something that we have been addressing since 2019, and we have been studying at length. We are seeing that violent crime rate come down. This shows that our efforts are bearing fruit. We are committed to continuing along that vein because the work is absolutely not done, not by far, so we're going to keep at it. And so, what I have heard them explain in open court, which I can echo because all of us heard it together, is that we need to fund issues related to the court backlog. There are too many people that are out free because there's just not enough space in the jail. And then also issues related to retaining our staff, and they're not paid enough when compared to the other areas. And so Commissioner Ramsey said he wants more money to law enforcement, so they squeezed out this $20 million. And the question is, what do we use it for? And he might have proposed something. They came back with, let's do salary increases. My hypothesis is it has something to do with you can't just fund bodies. You got to fund everything that comes with it. But most importantly, what we need right now is not so much positions. We have 400 plus positions. We need people willing to take those positions, and that comes not with new positions, it comes with incentives. So people are going to want to come fill those boots so that we can put the boots on the ground.